you. My name is Imani Boston. I'm a senior auditor with the DC Auditor's Office. I'm joined here with my supervisor, Ed Farley.
Holly.
Okay. He was the supervisor on this project. I was the auditor in charge of this project. And today we're here to present to you what we found in our report. And we did a report on reviewing the DC government's outside employment for employees. And we issued a report in April of this year. The title's right there. You can find the report on our website. That states that the district should consider requiring review and approval of all district employees outside employment. And I think this is a great topic because, as you heard, Director, this is one of the biggest issues that Vega had as far as violations and complaints coming into the office. So we wanted to touch on it. Next slide. And so today, what we hope you learn from us is what are the key elements of a performance audit finding. We are performance auditors mainly, and we will show you all what we do with our processes and how we come up with findings and reports. Secondly, what is a MAR? That's actually what we end up issuing. It's a management alert report, and we'll get into what it is and why we decided to issue a management alert report instead of a full audit. Thirdly, we're going to talk about the gaps within the requirements for DC outside employment. And that's the first step when you're doing an audit. What is the criteria? What are you supposed to do? So we'll go into that as well. And then lastly, we wanted to see what other local governments are doing in the surrounding districts. So we looked at Prince George's County. We also looked at Montgomery County to see what requirements do they have for outside employment, and could that be something that we implement here in the district? Next slide. A little bit about ODCA before we get started. The DC the District of Columbia Auditor's Office is an accountability office. We're in the legislative branch of the district's government. Currently, we have about 28 employees, and we are independent of the mayor. We are one of the few independent agencies in the district. And our primary activity is performance auditing, which I kind of talked about a little bit before, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about what performance auditing is and what it means. Next slide, sorry. In order to do a performance audit, the District of Columbia Auditor's Office, we follow what's called the Yellow Book Government Accountability Standards. In order to issue a report in accordance to those standards, you must have these 5 elements for each issue that you find. And so the first one is, what is the criteria? What should be going on within the agency or within the program? And the second one is, what is the condition? We know what the law says. We know what DC Code, DCMR, even your internal policies and procedures tell us you're supposed to do, but what's actually happening at your agency? And it may be because the law may not be correct and your policies are better or your internal policies work best. But what are you doing versus what the law says you should be doing? And the cause. The cause is when the condition is different from the criteria. What you're supposed to be doing and what you are doing don't align. And that's the cause of the issue, because they're not adhering to this because of A, B, and C. And the effect. If your agency or your program does not follow the criteria or the law, what can happen? It could have an effect on residents. It could have an effect on budget. It could have so many effects. So depending on the program, depending on the agency, the effects always vary. But they're very important. Why do we need to know this? Why is this important? Mainly the effect will tell you who is going to hurt, who it could, who could be affected by what's going on. And then lastly, the recommendation. Our agency or our audit teams work really hard, and we're at your agency for months, and we kind of understand a lot about the program. We understand the criteria, and we're trying to find what can we recommend that will help your agency fix whatever the problem is that we identified. And that usually is from the cause. This is the issue. This is why you're not adhering to your criteria. So how can we correct why you're not doing something?
So this, this might be the audit nerd in me talking early on a Tuesday morning, but these elements of a finding are second nature to Imani and I. And I think one of the reasons why we put this slide in here is to sort of set up some of the other content that we're going to talk about. But we also, this was one of the learning objectives also, that this is a great framework for analyzing any issue that you have at work. You can actually, analyze some issues in your personal life too. But if you're asked to, analyze an issue and present a cogent argument or explanation to somebody in your organization, think about these elements. What should be, what is actually happening, what is the reason for the disconnect between the two? Why should we care about this? Who's being hurt? What's happening? What's not happening? What is the effect of the district? And what do you want someone to do about it? So this was one of our stated learning objectives, that hopefully you will not only learn something about outside employment and what we did with regard to outside employment, but if you could take away these elements of an audit finding and understand that it's a really great rubric for sort of analyzing any issue, added benefit to this morning session.
Next slide. Why outside employment? Why did we do it when we did it? And we do know that later on in the day, there is a session solely about recent what we think should be audited for the upcoming fiscal year. But we're not just grabbing them out of a hat. There's a lot of research that goes into it. There's a lot of what's on the news, who's interested. We listen to council hearings, so we listen to what the council thinks, but we also listen to what do the witnesses who come forth in front of the council, how strong do they feel about it. Sometimes we get audits from just residents who have maybe started a petition and got so many signatures, like, hey, this is important to this amount of people. Can you please look into it? So audits are initiated in several different ways. This one, for example, was initiated because there was a lot of news coverage on the district's outside employment issues. Just to name two of the several, one in April and one in August of 2024. Two employees in management positions who both had more than one outside other job. They had two secondary jobs. One ended in a violation and a fine of $17,500, and the other one ended in a fine of $25,000. And I think they'll probably talk more about that throughout the week. But this is why we thought it was important. We wanted to see how can all these employees have secondary jobs. I know Ed and I, as we were doing this audit, like, oh, we probably should have got an appropriate, one that we can get a second job. Are we the only ones that didn't take advantage of getting a second job without conflict during the pandemic? And so we spoke to Vega, we've had interviews with DCHR, and we do know a lot of people do have second jobs, and it is okay. But then there are times like these when they are in violation. So Ed and I chuckled about they were just lazy because we did not look into getting a non-conflict second job. Next slide. So what is a MAR? Like I said, usually an audit it's supposed to last 10 months. We do a whole performance audit. By the time I am done with the audit, I pretty much know the job. That's how much detail we look into. That's how much research we do. We know the criteria. We know your internal policy procedures. We know it all. And the first step is the criteria. That's the first step to performing an audit. And what we found was when we started to conduct this audit on DC outside employment, we're like, this criteria is all over the place. I can't tell you what you should be doing or what you're not doing if the criteria can't tell me either. And so I'm like, oh, this is why people are confused. I'm also confused. And so I said, let's talk to management. I think we should stop the audit. And I think this is a bigger issue. This needs to be a management alert. A management alert report is when you think there's an issue that needs to be fixed immediately. You don't want to wait. You want to get it to them. You want to write it up, and hopefully someone will take interest in it and actually implement your recommendation. So a management alert report can be done in several ways. Like I just said, you might stop in the beginning. There's not enough here. The criteria is not clear. Let's make sure the agency or the mayor is aware, hey, there's going to always be some type of issues because this is not clear. Or there's other instances where you're doing an audit and the audit's going well, but then you ask for certain information and maybe it's a financial system. You're like, oh, the numbers are way off. Something's wrong. There's a big error with the system. The agency needs to know they need to fix it for the future. Now, it doesn't impede us from continuing the audit, but we do want to let you know this is a problem that we found along the way. We don't want to wait till the end. We want to tell you now. So we will stop the audit. We'll write a management alert report, meaning we need your attention on this matter, but we then continue with our regular audit. But in this case, we stopped. Criteria is the first thing. There were some issues, so we decided we're not going to go forward with an audit. Let's issue a report. Next slide. And this is what we found. Next slide. What we found is the criteria was an issue. And like I said before, for the auditor's office, we look at DC code, DC municipal regulations. We'll take into account your own internal policy procedures. We also look at other jurisdictions and use that as criteria as well. And what we found, DC code does state that no employee of the District of Columbia government shall pretty much engage in any type of outside employment that shows a conflict or would appear to show a conflict. And so, okay, that's clear. We know that. So then we go to DCMR. What does the DCMR say? Very similar to DC code. DC government employees shall not engage in any outside employment that is any incompatible with any of their full and proper discharge of his or her duties or responsibilities. Got it. So then we went to the district personnel manual. We needed more. What else? How does the district know if you even have an outside employment? How do they know? Went to DPM, and it says employees may not hold a second job with another employee that appears to or creates an actual conflict of interest. The only thing additional that we did find in DPM that we did not find anywhere else is this one statement. Agency heads shall ensure compliance with the provisions of the issuance and should refer any incidents or violations that warrant investigation to DC Human Resources. That kind of light bulb went off. You know, we know Vega. We know Vega to be the agency where you should report outside employment or any ethics issues. So when we saw that in the DPM, we wanted to know more. What does that mean? Next slide. And again, does anyone see the problem with this criteria? What have you gathered from this? Do you know how, as an employee, you're supposed to submit outside employment? Does it tell us? No, didn't tell me either. And so that was the issue. And then we saw, again, the DCHR should be one, the agency head should refer cases to DCHR. So we did what we always do. We go and dig for more, and we go and have interviews. Next slide. Again, this is just saying that emphasis on there's no requirement. We do know we can have a second job. And we do know that our second job should not have any conflict to our job that we currently hold with the District of Columbia. But what the criteria did not say is, how does the agency head know you have a second job? When are you supposed to submit any approval or paperwork to say, hi, I am considering getting a second job? It doesn't tell you. Next slide. So when we read the DCHR's responsibility within the DPM that agency heads are supposed to contact them, the next thing we did was we contacted DCHR. Hi, we're reading DPM. You know, are you familiar with this language? Are you all receiving outside employment violations, conflicts, and things? No, we're not. Okay, so that's strange that DPM says that it should go to you. Maybe no one's sending anything. I doubt that. So, went to Vega. Hey, do you all work with DCHR? Have they ever referred cases to you that they've gotten from other agencies? No, not if it wasn't their own agency, DCHR. And then Vega, also said that they, like the director said, they get cases all throughout the year, and that's who we know, for most of us know. If you have an issue, if you have an ethics issue, you are to contact Vega. And then one thing Vega does have, but it's not a requirement, is an advisory opinion. You may go to Vega at any time, like the director said, please go before you start the job, or it'll be an admission. But if you go there before you start the job, you can get guidance from Vega as to whether that job will have a conflict or even be perceived as a conflict. But other than that, is there no requirement that says, I have started a second job, I have to let somebody know? Who do I tell? Anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to make an additional point here. This was one of the several interesting parts of developing the management alert. Sorry, this doesn't sound very good. Our interviewees at Vega, very helpful, very informative. Our interviewees at DCHR were also informative. I think this is a good example of when you read something on paper, again, this criteria, when you read this criteria, it's fairly clear what should be happening, right? But when we actually, and this is a lot of what we do as performance auditors, we sort of say, this is what the criteria tell us should be happening. Is this actually happening? So this was very interesting in sort of this notion of coordination and communication on these types of cases. And it was, without going into sort of the specifics of the interviews that we did, this was very interesting to sort of hear perhaps a level of knowledge at DCHR about this requirement that was a little bit surprising. We thought that there might be a little bit more awareness as to what DCHR should be doing on these issues. So I just wanted to emphasize that point again, that again, part of what we do is we look at what should be in the criteria, but we actually ask people, is this happening? If it's not happening, why isn't it happening? And it could be any number of reasons. It could be lack of awareness of that requirement. And I will say, some of our interviewees were not as familiar with these criteria as we expected them to be. So again, I bring that up just to explain that that's part of our methodology. And that was one of the interesting things about this was, it was an interesting story regarding the lack of communication and lack of coordination on some of these cases. But we really appreciated our Vega and our DCHR interviewees. I'm not trying to disparage anybody. It's just, it was just very interesting to sort of unravel that disconnect and figure out what should be happening, but what was actually happening.
So then, next thought was, let's see what other local governments are doing, especially in surrounding jurisdictions, people very close to us. PG County and Montgomery County. We actually looked at several, but these are just two examples. We went to Virginia, Arlington, Alexandria, and surprisingly, everyone pretty much had a little bit more than we did when it came to outside employment, which is the next step that's missing from the criteria, is that an employee must apply for secondary employment approval. You cannot just get a second job and it's you're the only person that knows, or your coworker next to you knows, but you two are the only people that know that you're working a second job. There's a requirement in PG County and Montgomery County that you have to apply, and it has to be reviewed and approved. So that was the level that we were looking for, because you can't hold people accountable for something that you're not requiring them to do. And so that's what we found, and we found that this was just, other jurisdictions already made that decision and decided to implement further restrictions on outside employment. And if you go to the next slide, Montgomery County was just one of they took it to another level. If you go to Montgomery County's website, outside employment is public. They list your name, they list when you started your employment, they list where you work. We did not recommend that level of detail for the district, whether, it's up to the district to determine how they would implement it. But I thought this was really, they're serious about outside employment. And so we had conversations about whether this is okay or not as far as district government law, and we did not know. We could not make that determination. That's for the mayor and the council and any of the designees that are going to hopefully implement our recommendation. That's for them to decide. But this is just an example of how far some counties are going about outside employment. And I bet you if we had something like that, everyone would be upfront with their outside employment, and there'd probably be fewer violations. That's just my assumption. Yes.
I don't think I would be a problem. I don't think it's any concern.
Yeah, so.
Just being honest, I don't, if I'm not doing anything, if it doesn't go with my DC, and so I work for DC company, if I'm working in Shelter, Virginia, why is it your concern?
Yeah, so that is not up for us. We are the DC Auditor's Office. We are just looking at the criteria. That would be something that, Adrian, you want to take?
Just really quick, I just wanted to say that a part of the reason why you would disclose your outside employment is so that our office, or potentially DCHR, but our office would be the best office, would help you make that determination, right? Sometimes a district government employee that works in the agency, you do, a specific thing at the DMV or risk management or whatever, but you may not be in the best position to see the overlap between your outside employment and what you do for the district, right? Maybe your agency has vendors, right? And somehow your outside employer works with one of those vendors and you're taking action in your district government job that has some sort of impact or effect on the business that's happening between those two. That's a potential conflict of interest. And because at Vega, that's what we do all day, we review the law on conflicts of interest, we review the law on outside employment, it is best to come to us and get that advice. And I just also wanted to say that we completely agree with ODCA. We think that everybody should get their outside employment approved. We have sent draft legislation up to the council saying as much that should be a requirement for everyone. And how we coordinate with other agencies, that's still, open, and we, have to work that out. But we do think that this should happen. And we also, an employee, it's easy for you to say, oh, this has nothing to do with my district government job, and keep going, right? But what if it does? Because we are all subject to the code of conduct. Therefore, whether or not you properly analyze the overlap, you still may face a code of conduct violation if we find that there was overlap or a conflict.
These questions might be for you, actually.
Just a quick question. Just a quick scenario. Let's just say that I am a licensed electrician in Maryland, Virginia, DC. I'm a licensed electrician. I go around doing whatever I do. But I also work for the DC Department of Buildings as an inspector. That's a conflict? Would that be considered something like a conflict?
Okay, so really quickly, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. However, what she said was, I'm just repeating it so that I can get onto the recording for WebEx, is if you're a licensed electrician in DC, Maryland, Virginia, but you're also an inspector for the Department of Buildings, whether or not that's a conflict. And the short answer is maybe. It depends. It depends on what you're doing on behalf of the district and what you're doing in your outside employment. And that's why it's important to come talk to us. Right now, it is an option to come talk to us. We encourage you to come and talk to us about your outside employment so that we can get you to the best ethical option, right? Maybe you have an opportunity and a lot of people come to us and they'll say, I work with this organization on behalf of DC. They have an opening, they want me to go and work for them. It would be outside my tour duty. I'd be like, well, no, be right, because they do business with your agency, right? And it makes so much sense. You work with these people all day, you've gotten to know them, they understand your skill set, and that's why they want you, but they do business with your agency. So there are things that we can easily identify for you. And so right now, we just encourage you to come and have that conversation with us, but we do hope in the future that it is mandatory that you have to tell us about it. Now, I don't know about putting y'all on the website. I don't know about that. We have not recommended that, but we do want you to.
May I suggest that we go to the recommendation slide and we sort of talk more there?
Okay.
No, that was terrible.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
All right. Again, we did not recommend for the district to publicly post people's outside employment, but we will get to the recommendation. And then, is it about this slide? If not, you want to hold it? Okay.
It's about this whole.
Okay.
I have a question of whether or not you would check with them, because I understand that does have a.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're actually about to talk about that. And not only did we did ask a couple of district agencies, but the issue is it needs to be district-wide. So I was about to say MPD has their own internal policy where they are requested to report their outside employment. Our agency also has a form every year that you need to report your outside employment. DCPS also had forms. We did not go around to every agency because although that's great that people have their own independent forms, there needs to be a district-wide form. Why is everyone doing their own thing? Why does your form look different from my form? Why are you asking something that they didn't ask? We don't want everyone to have their own individualized form. But yes, we did want to mention MPD, DC Public
DCPS
Schools.
as a separate policy, but yes, MPD, we do talk about MPD in the MAR.
Yes, it's in the report.
So,
Yeah, if you have your own business, that's outside employment. Yes.
With your recommendations, would it allow for the agency to still modify it? Because I could see some agencies have additional oversight regulatory requirements. They may need to add additional things. Would they have that flexibility?
maybe go to the recommendation.
Yeah, so the recommendation.
We just want to be really clear
Okay.
on this point of what we actually recommended in the MAR.
Okay. Sorry.
Sure.
Go ahead, take it.
Stay away from that one. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so great questions, and I'm sure these questions are going to be asked and answered later on today and later in the week. We just wanted to be really clear about our methodology and what we said and what we didn't say. So you can see we went back, condition, right? We said what was actually happening, criteria, what should be happening, cause for the disconnect between condition and criteria, right? And so we just want to be clear that ODCA, we do not make policy recommendations, okay? So essentially what we said in the MAR was we found problems with the criteria, right? Put yourself in your agency head's head, and if you were responsible for ensuring compliance with the policy, but it doesn't tell you what you can ask, what you can do, what you can ask for. Some people, obviously feel that's none of your business, right? But if you're an agency head and you are expected to ensure compliance with this policy, what can you do and what can't you do? So again, the upshot of our MAR was we noticed problems with these criteria. Why should you care? Well, because there continue to be, as reported in the press, ongoing instances, high-profile instances of people having outside employment that they shouldn't have, right? So we highlighted the criteria. The problems with the criteria were the essence, the crux of our MAR, right? And we want to be really clear as to what we recommended, okay? We didn't take a policy position, but what we said was, the recommendation was that the mayor, in consultation with personnel officials and the DC Council, should determine how best to ensure compliance with existing law on outside employment, okay? And clarify how any violations of the district's prohibitions should be received, investigated, tracked, resolved, and reported. Because there are responsibilities out there that are assigned to Vega, there are responsibilities that are assigned to DCHR, right? Remember that, Brett, that piece of criteria in the DPM issuance, and then there are responsibilities assigned to agency heads to ensure. So again, we want to be clear that our recommendation was that the mayor, in consultation with others, should determine how best to, okay? So we just wanted to be clear that that was our recommendation. We didn't take a particular policy stance. We wanted to, as Imani referenced earlier in the presentation, the management alert. We wanted to alert management to issues that we found, problems that we found in the existing criteria that we felt should be clarified, and we recommended that they should, the mayor and others, should determine how best to address these.
And this is not just for the MAR. This is for all audit reports that come from the DC Auditor's Office. We are not specific in recommendations. We cannot tell you exactly how to do things. Our recommendations look similar to this across the board. You need to determine the best way to fix the problem. We told you the problem. We told you the effect. We told you all those issues. Now we need you to fix it. Sometimes we get a little more specific, but we would never recommend for the district to add a public facing portal. That's too specific, and that's not up to us to determine. We leave it up to the people that need to make those decisions. In this case, it's the mayor, the council, and any other officials that they deem necessary to be a part of the process, not us. So.
But in your report, did you show them what PG County and Montgomery County?
Oh yes, we talked everything we presented to you is in the report and more. It's not just those 2 counties. We laid out, I think, about 4 different counties, and they all did at least the review and approval. We also, like you mentioned in the back, we mentioned some of the DC agencies that we kind of already knew or had some connection to that were doing their own internal review of outside employment. We mentioned them as well. So we gave them a lot of examples. We gave them everything we had to show them, hey, this is an issue, and hopefully you will, look into addressing it. So everything we reported to you, we reported to them. Next slide. Conclusion. Next slide. Just to wrap up, we just kind of already wrapped up, but we concluded that there is a risk that violations can occur. We know that. The director just stood up and said that's their highest complaints that they get are for possible violations. Not that they are all violations, but it's a risk that people are having outside employment that conflicts with their DC government job. We know that. After reviewing the requirements, we believe that the risk can be alleviated. And we also show them how people are making efforts to try to minimize the number of violations that occur. And then our recommendation, we hope that the mayor and the council do actually read the report and come together to think about how they can also help to minimize these risks by hopefully amending some of the regulations so that it's more clear as to us as DC employees. What is our requirement? What are we supposed to do? And then agency heads, what are we supposed to do? So hopefully, they take that and at some point you see some implementation on it, but.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back to, Imani, as you were talking, I wanted to come back to the comment in the back about, the feeling that, well, this really isn't any of your business. I'm telling you that I'm in compliance with the policy and it's really none of your business. Sort of thinking it through, we think that sort of clarifying, what we recommend to the mayor and the council and DCHR about clarifying what the requirements are and roles and responsibilities and what people can and can't do. It benefits both sides, right? If you have, under the existing criteria, if you have an employee, let's say, just purely hypothetically for, just to illustrate this point, if you have a supervisor who, if a supervisor comes to me and says, do you have another job, that is conflicting with, I'm hearing rumors that you have, outside employment. I want you to, give me some additional information. I want you to give me some documentation about your outside job. Where does it say in the existing criteria that the manager or the agency is allowed to do that? Right. So we feel that stronger criteria would benefit everyone in this situation. What managers and agencies are allowed to do in order to fulfill their responsibility to ensure compliance. What rights and protections does an employee have against somebody coming and asking for information about outside employment that they are not allowed to ask about? So again, you can see if you sort of look from both perspectives, an agency head doesn't know what he or she is allowed to do in order to ensure compliance. And an employee reading this criteria has no indication that, am I allowed to say, that's none of your business. You may not ask me. I am telling you that I am in compliance with, the criteria say that I shall not, and I can tell you that I am not. End of conversation. So you can see, again, this all gets back to why we set up sort of that framework at the start about condition, criteria, cause, and effect, right? It all hinges on the criteria. And essentially, at the end of the day, we're saying the criteria need to be better for everybody who is involved in administering this process. And that's what our recommendation is to the mayor and DCHR And the council is, these criteria need to be better. And again, going back to, thank you for the reference to MPD. MPD is discussed in the MAR. I encourage everybody to read the MAR. And then we also talk about, why the jurisdictional comparison. That's part of the effect, the discussion of effect. Why should I care about this? Well, just so you know, and again, this is to help decision makers, just so you know, if you weren't aware, surrounding jurisdictions, their criteria are much more prescriptive and much more strict. So just so you know, you may feel as if, everything is fine, but helping you to make your decision as to whether additional action is necessary on this, we just want you to know. And again, we're not advocating for a website. We're not advocating anything. The information in the jurisdictional comparison is presented just to allow DCHR, the mayor, and the council to make an informed decision on this issue.
In your finding, with the examples you gave, are you finding that the people who are more management and upper management as regular employees, is that with the requirements that they're asking for outside employment? What if I'm an employee who needs to make ends meet with? Like, why should I, if you're not gonna pay me and give me a raise, like, why should that be an issue with me getting an outside job to help my household stay above point?
Did everybody hear the question?
Yeah.
Everybody, okay, did we notice any sort of striations in more frequency at certain levels of management versus line employees?
No, I would say we didn't go into that much detail because it wasn't worth it. The issue started way above who violated outside employment or not. We only mentioned those two because that's what prompted us. Like, those were some of the cases that were going on while we were starting to decide what audit we were going to do. Now, if they had criteria, we probably would have did more analysis and showed a chart of who was in violation, what kind of roles they had, to make it more detailed. But at this point in court, for this report, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter. Maybe Vega can speak on that more. I don't know if this is at a different time, but we didn't do that analysis because our issue started way before that. But if they had criteria, we would have.
I'm sorry. Can I just make one additional point? Again, to Imani's point about the analysis, we would only be analyzing really the cases that are known, right? So in terms of analysis and whether that is a representative sample of what is actually happening, we don't know what is actually happening because people aren't required to report their outside employment. So, it's a great question. You're kind of thinking like an auditor, and I love it. Like, what do the data tell us? Is there a certain frequency, sort of depending on where you sit in DC government? It's a great sort of auditor type question. But again, if we were to do that type of analysis, all we would be doing would be analyzing the known cases, the cases that have come to, and that's not a representative sample of what's actually happening.
Or even analysis of the agencies who have submitted the most violations. That just means maybe they're more aware. I don't know. Maybe they have more ethics training than other agencies. So you might see that, but that doesn't necessarily mean this agency is the problem. It's that someone from this agency is actually reporting, and that's how we're finding out. So we wanted to, we didn't want to really hone into that because it doesn't really tell a full picture.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem at all. To me, I guess what I'm getting from this, the clarity is that if outside employment is not prohibited. However, if you are to seek outside employment, then maybe definitely check with Vega to be sure there's no conflict. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. But I think for us, our stance is that outside employment is, like you said, you can have outside employment as long as it's not in conflict. That part of the law is there. But now we didn't know what else. What is my duty? When do I, or what's my requirement to go to my agency head to say, I am thinking about getting a second job? I know Vega says, please come to them before you get one, but what's the requirement from the district? It's not clear. So yes, that is correct. I know Vega said before, and they're going to say it again. Please come to them for an advisory opinion, and they can help you. But in our report, we did mention that Vega has an advisory opinion, but what does the law say? And that is not clear, is what our report is saying. I'm sorry, I thought about that. Sorry.
And I apologize, I came in a bit late. So I heard the answer to the question in terms of you weren't looking at upper management or you didn't look at that stratification. Was there anything that came up with regards to people who have to do the financial disclosures annually? And so how does that show up? Because it seems like that's a place for those who have to file that, we do have to submit something. So how does that play into sort of your findings and recommendations?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. I think I was supposed to mention it in the earlier slide when I mentioned MPD. So we did speak to Vega. About 25% of the district has to do financial disclosure. That's not a whole lot. So it's 75% that doesn't have to disclose a second job, any financial interest, anything. So that will help in that 25%. You have to do it every year. And I'm not sure how many times that they find violations within financial disclosures. I'm not sure about that. But that does help, that some of us do have to fill out a form every year. It's on your mind. You think twice about things when you have to certify on a form. So that's what we're saying here. Not just the financial disclosure, 25%. Let's make it for everyone. And maybe there's going to be a few people that might think twice about filling out a form and signing their name, and they have outside employment that they're not really sure about. So we did look into that, but I'm not sure if you all will get into how many violations you find through a financial disclosure statement. I'm not sure. Not many, very few.
So it seems that you all focused on outside employment and didn't really, I believe the ethics rules also talk about outside activities. So is there a reason why you guys focus on employment? Because surely I can see situations where like somebody might be a non-paid voluntary member of like a board or a commission and still be in a position to either benefit financially or, perhaps have other conflicts of interest that would then, violate kind of other parts of the ethics rules. So just wondering as to why you all focus on the employment piece and not the activities piece, and if you all would have the same recommendations for just activities in general, or if you could provide some insight there, that might be helpful.
Sure. We'll take it.
Sure.
Okay. So we focus on outside employment because that was the buzz thing. That was what was going on. That was the issue that was going on in the district. So there's a lot of times we go to programs and they handle several different programs or divisions underneath an agency. We can't do everything. So we wanted to focus on outside employment because that was the biggest issue from our knowledge. And so sometimes it can lead over to outside activity, and hopefully while they're doing hopefully implementing our recommendations, they think about all the other things as well. But that's why we focus solely on outside employment. Yeah.
Yes, while I have no issue with reporting, that just saying across the board, with the many different agencies in DC, I suspect they touch all spheres of life. So I can foresee every conceivable job or employment you can have outside. One way or the other, you can find conflict. It might not be like a direct conflict, but if you look at it hard enough, some aspect of that job, you can actually like you may be working for someone who has a contract with DC or whatever the case may be. You might not know how far what the case may be. So I might be out there cutting lawn, but then I'm cutting the lawn with somebody who had influence in DC, and then whatever the station is, I can see a conflict in every possible job.
Yeah. I can understand that, and I don't know if this is a good answer, Asia, but I would say I think that's where Vega can be really helpful, and that's the whole notion of the safe harbor and getting the opinion. If you suspect that if you're being overly cautious and you suspect that there might be a perceived conflict, Vega's your friend, and again that's I would lean on that process to have somebody say, you can then go back and say, I consulted Vega on this and they told me that they didn't see a conflict. So I don't know, Asia, was that a good on the spot off the cuff answer?
Yes, that was a good answer. I just wanted to say that there is plenty of outside work and outside activity that district government employees can ethically participate in. And also just to note that there's a difference between having a conflict of interest, which is specific to the statute, right? You're taking some action in your official capacity as a district employee that has a direct and predictable impact on your financial interests or the financial interests of someone you're closely affiliated with, business partner, spouse, something like that, right? This is a very specific definition. And then separately from that, there are 9 outside employment and activity restrictions other than having a conflict that you have to avoid as well. So just come to us, we'll have the conversation and figure it out until we can get law and regulation on the books that require you to report.
My concern is that should you achieve this goal of making it a requirement that we report any outside activity, jobs, blah, blah, blah.
Not our goal. We're just asking that somebody.
Yes.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. We're just saying take a closer look at this.
Absolutely noted.
Use the big we. It's we.
Collective we.
Oh, yes.
The collective we. Okay. Let's say that this is achieved. Is there, or will someone institute an appeals process? Because you may run into an agency situation where whoever's in charge of that at the agency, for whatever reason, may decide they're going to deny you. You know, is there going to be some sort of structure, or there's something? Because we run into things like that on a regular basis, just in our regular jobs. You know, somebody's opinion is the only thing that counts. Is there going to be something for? Because as she was saying, a lot of people are doing things to keep their heads above water. Mm-hmm. So, you know, imagine you go to your agency director or whoever it is, and that director doesn't care and just says no. You know, where do you go?
I think that's a great question. That is a great question, and I would hope that is wrapped up in what we're recommending, is that clarify how any suspected violations should be received, investigated, tracked, resolved. I think you make a great point that wrapped up in that resolved piece would be an appeal process, a review process. I disagree with what my agency is saying. Can I get, can somebody else weigh in on this? So wrapped up in there. And again, we didn't get too prescriptive, but you're right. I would say that what you're recommending is embedded in that word resolved.
And again, I think that's why our recommendation is for district-wide instead of MPD doing their own thing, ODCA doing their own thing. It's to make it a little bit more even. That maybe it doesn't go to your director. We don't know. We're waiting to see.
And the collective, we appreciate you.
Good question.
I thought I saw another. Oh.
Hi, I review a lot of the disclosures here at Big, and I just wanted to offer that in terms of secondary employment, a lot of the conflicts you see are with tour duty, time, and conflicts. So just make sure that secondary jobs are not prohibited within the guidelines. So just make sure that you're not conflicting your tour duty. I would just want to leave you with that for anyone who's thinking about it.
Yeah, I think both of those cases that we had noted, we didn't get into it. I think there's going to be a really good session later about recent cases. Haven't seen it, but I saw it on the agenda, and we didn't want to get into it. But most of those people we saw cases where they were going from one job for a couple of hours and running to the next job. It was a conflict, But not to say that even if you're outside of your tour duty, you still have a conflict. You still might have a conflict. So we don't want to just say only because it's at the same time, but that is one that was that we saw and that we noted in our report, is that literally he's going on lunch break to rush over to another job. And so that was major conflict. I think that's why those cases are out into the news and the public, because they were really egregious. But they're all small conflicts too that aren't are violations as well.
So that just reminds me anecdotally, one of the things that we heard through some of our interviewees were, we were asking about how some of these cases come to your attention. And one of the interviewees said, and this may or may not be a surprise to some people, but they said that often it'll be a disgruntled coworker who is annoyed at somebody who is working their second job, and they are having to cover for that person or do work for them or explain
sort of vaguely as to why that person isn't there. So that was interesting to me. It wasn't really that the person had the second job, it was the fact that their having a second job impacted that person reporting the allegation, impacted their ability to do their job and sort of their performance. And so I thought that was interesting. That is how a number of complaints come to Vega and other agency management, that it's the, hey, as long as you're doing this and it doesn't impact me, but when it starts to impact the ability to do my job, that's when I personally have a problem.
Any additional questions? The last slide is just our contact information. Like I said, ODCA receives audits from all different avenues. It could be the council. It's a lot of us internally doing a lot of research. It could be residents just like most of you all. It could be DC government employees like all of us. So if you have an idea and you think it's really important, we do take that into consideration. Please don't flood any emails, but we do consider, we work for the residents. We want to determine what issues you all have, and we want to fix them. So that's what our office is here to do, and this is just one of the many reports that we do. This is a short one if you want to read it. We have very lengthy ones that go into an actual full performance audit. So our website is there. You can take a picture or write it down, and happy we got to present to you all today. Thank you.
We've got one thing. Should we tell me that?
Oh, they're gonna look at. Go ahead, sure.
So just in case anybody's wondering, so we directed the recommendation to the mayor's office, and just statement of fact, we did not receive a written response. We asked for a written response to to the recommendation into the MAR, and we have not received one yet, and it was published, Imani said, in April. So in case anybody was wondering but didn't ask, how was our recommendation received? We have not received a response.
Usually responses to recommendations I usually do in 15 days, so that is the response. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Hi, everybody. So we are on lunch now. We do have some sandwiches for you all out there and chips. A couple different options on the sandwiches, or you can go out and get your own lunch. There's a lot of good places around here to eat. Please come back and join us. We start back up at 1 p.m. At 1, we're going to have seeking, negotiating, and post-employment. All right, so that's just taking through the process if you're thinking about either leaving district government work to go into the private sector, or maybe you're getting a second job, kind of more specifics on what that process looks like, potential conflicts, all of that stuff, and post-employment advice for leave district employment. And then we'll have a 15-minute break after that, and at 2:15, we're going to do outside employment case by case. I'm going to be presenting, so just come back and see me. And that's the one that Imani and Ed mentioned. We're going to go through all of the outside employment activity violations that we had in fiscal year 2025. And then at the end of the day, we're going to do outside employment activity, hypotheticals, and everyday scenarios. We're going to go through different hypotheticals, and there'll be a hypothetical that we can interact and talk about for each of the 9 outside employment restrictions, okay? So we'll see you back at 1. Thank you all.